welcome. I am Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. Today we are here in smoky Northern California. We're in the midst of fire season, so please excuse my N95 mask as the air quality, as you can see, is quite abominable. Today what we're going to be talking about are directional cables. This is something that we've heard a lot of cable manufacturers talk about as a benefit and something that you want to have on any of your instrument cables, no matter what. So today what we're going to do is a little bit of myth busting and a little bit of uncovering of exactly what directional cables are, whether you want one, and if there are any alternatives that might be better served, or maybe even a way of wiring a directional cable that might serve you better in terms of not only improving the tone, but also offering better RF shielding for the entire cable to try to mitigate noise as much as possible. So let's get into it.
My name is Mason Marangella. I build rigs for the industry's top professionals. Now I'm teaching guitarists how to build rigs like the pros with DIY tips, easy mods, and all the tricks of the trade. I am the Rig Doctor.
So today what I'm going to start with is showing you how to wire a directional cable. And I'm actually going to show you how to wire a directional cable in one of the fashions used by one of the most famous cable manufacturers in the world, which is none other than Pete Cornish. So I'm actually using the exact cable that Pete Cornish uses inside all of his silver signature cables, which is the Belden 8412 mic cable. Now you might recognize this cable because it was the winner of our latest cable shootout, where we actually sell these cables pre-made if you're interested on our Reverb store. So we'll put a link below if you'd like to check those out. But this will show you exactly how you can make them for yourself on cents on the dollar very, very easily. First things first, we're going to have to strip off a little over an inch on each side. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do that first. Strip side one, and we'll do side two. Now you're going to see that there's kind of a material here that's kind of just helping keep the cable in place. I'm going to go ahead and cut away that material. I don't need that. I'm going to leave the shield there for now. Equally, on this side, I cut away all that material that I don't need. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the shield from the cable. I like to use either a tweezer or a small screwdriver and kind of just help me work the shield loose from the rest of the cable. Again, if it's a spiral shield or if it's a braided shield like this, once it gets into the cable itself, it's going to be touching every single little square inch of available shielding in there, so you don't need to have every single stranded or braided wire together. You can cut away a little bit of it, or if you lose a little bit when you're going to strip it away, it's not going to hurt anything. All right, so I got my shield, and then you'll notice that there's two conductors here. Typically when we're talking about directional cables, it's almost always twisted pair shielded. So you see that there's two center conductors and a shield. We're going to talk about how we designate all these and what makes us directional. I'm going to repeat it on this side very quickly. So now the question is, if we look at any of our connectors that we have, they're just tip and sleeve. There's not a space to put three different conductors or two center conductors and a shield on these types of plugs. So what do? So typically, when people are talking about directional cables, what they do is they float the shield at one end. That means if you're looking at all the wires that I have right here, they cut away this wire on one side, and on the opposite side, they'll connect it together with one of the center conductors. This is what they're calling directional. So I'm going to start with the side that's going to go on the guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut away the shield, because we don't want the shield on that side according to people who believe in the directional cable theory. I'm going to designate black to be my sleeve in this case, and go to the sleeve of the connector. So I'm just going to pre-tin this. That just means I'm pre-soldering it, kind of getting it prepared to solder. So I'm going to add a little solder to the tip and the sleeve here, just getting it ready. And I'm going to do the same to my wire that I've already started to prep. And I'm going to make sure that I kind of tin it all the way down to the hilt. I really want to keep all the wire wrapped up there as much as possible. I'm going to cut away quite a bit of that because I know I'm not going to need it. Perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and solder that in there. Heating up my solder, laying that down right in there. Perfect. I got a little tiny bit of wire sticking up, so I'm just going to take my snips, snip that off. And then I'm going to snip this to length. I'm just kind of going to eyeball how much I need to take off in order to get it to sit in there perfectly. That looks like that's going to be perfect. It's going to take off the least amount of the insulation as possible, because again, you want to protect it from a short. You don't want to expose too much wire. Tin this guy in place. And then I'll take my snips and I'll actually kind of just use them as a little needle nose to kind of help me push this guy right in place right here on the tip. It's going to heat up a little solder in there, which I already had tinned. Perfect. I have this ready to go, perfectly wired. This is going to go to the guitar side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of tape on the guitar side, because once this goes together from the outside, there will be no other distinction telling me what is what. So I'm just going to put a little piece of blue painter's tape temporarily, so I remember that this is going to go to the guitar and that this is the side where the shield is disconnected. But let's go to the other side and let's show you how you do this just a little bit differently than how we did the guitar side. So the amp side is going to be slightly different.
You want to be like Slapsh and tour the world in private jet planes and play a sold-out show in front of millions of fans of Rio de Potatoes? Yeah, well then get your Belgian cables, because that's the only way you could be a rock star. Steve Brule, check it out.
All right, so this is going to go on the amp. The other side that we just did was for the guitar. The amp is a little bit different. On the amp side, we're not going to cut away the shield. What we're going to do is we're going to tie it together with the black wire, because that is what we determined was going to go to the sleeve. We're going to make these one connector, one big shield together that's going to be soldered to the connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my boot first. This is a real thick cable, so it takes a little elbow grease to get that on there. I'm going to strip away as much of the black wire as possible, expose as much as I can, and I'm just going to tie it together with the shield. And I'm just going to tin this. This is going to take a little bit more solder because there's just more surface area of wire here. Just going to get all the way down to the hilt there. Perfect. I'm just going to even it out a little. Now I know already from the last connector that I'm not going to need very much of the shield. I'm going to grab my TS Neutrik plug here. And all these materials will be linked for you in the description, so you'll be able to get everything that we have here. I'm going to tin this, both the tip and the sleeve. I'm going to feed my shield on there. Got that nicely wired, perfect. And then I'm just going to kind of measure out where the center conductor needs to meet the tip. Perfect. Just going to take off the littlest bit. Remember, I don't want to take off too much. I want to have as much of the insulation around there to protect it from a short. I'm going to bend this guy down into position. And then because I've already tinned both sides, I can just reheat these wires. And they're ready to go. It's perfect. Now all I need to do is I'm going to put on the housings. I'm going to put on the strain relief here. Now on most Neutriks, you don't need to use this top piece of the strain relief. You can just clip that away. So I'm going to do that here because I don't need that. Put that on. Slide it over. Make sure I pull it all the way through. I'm going to move up the boot. One side's done. Let's repeat on the other side. I'm going to leave my blue painter's tape on here. I'm just going to pull a little bit of it off so it's a little easier for me to slide everything over. Slide up the boot. Perfect. Now both ends seemingly are the same. However, we know on the guitar side, we've cut away the shield. There is no shield connected. It is floated on this side. And on the amplifier side, the shield is connected. Now, one thing that I like to do to make sure that I know what's what is I'll actually put a color coding, just like Pete Cornish does, on each side. So the yellow side will be the guitar side where the shield is floating. On the green side, it will be the amplifier side where the shield is connected. You can just go ahead and heat shrink those on there. Here's an example of what two completed plugs look like, where I just put amp and guitar on them, and then I just put some clear heat shrink over the existing colored heat shrink so I could keep that locked in. So that is how you make a directional cable. We were using the style of the Pete Cornish Silver Signature cables in order to be our exemplar on this one, where again the shield was floated on the side of the guitar, but the shield is connected on the side where the amplifier is. This is what most people mean when they're talking about directional cables, twisted pair shielded cables, and they're assigning the shield to one side and disconnecting it from the other. But let's talk about the benefits, whether this is really a thing, and whether it is actually going to help you improve your tone or cut noise away by reducing RF. So are directional cables really a thing that you need to be worrying about? Is it any better than the Mogami 2524 or the Belden 9778? Now, what Pete Cornish and a lot of other builders call their directional cables is what's known as semi-balanced. And it's a made-up term that doesn't have any sort of bearing in pro audio or in the guitar world. Really, it's sort of more of a marketing term or a term of art that has kind of made its way into our everyday lexicon, but it isn't balanced. It's still unbalanced. All guitar systems that I'm aware of are all unbalanced systems. So there really isn't any semi-balanced nature to this. Now, the thing that I think is interesting is when you look at what a lot of people call the source versus the load when they're talking about where they're connecting their shield in a directional cable, for the most part, they are misunderstanding what's what. The source almost always is considered the guitar, the pickups of the guitar, that's the source. The amplifier is the load. But for some reason in this context, it seems like people have confused certain things in balanced systems where you could disconnect the shield in certain circumstances, and they've applied it to unbalanced systems where it no longer holds water. There is no proof scientifically that there is any benefit. In fact, I would argue that it's actually the opposite, because you're pretty much making an antenna whenever you float your shield, even if it's on one end, no matter what end it is. So in truth, I don't see any benefit of using a directional cable in the fashion that I've talked about in terms of having a greater benefit in terms of RF. Now, you do notice that I am selling the Belden 8412 on our Reverb store. Why would I be doing that if I'm sort of speaking negatively against it? Well, I'm doing it in a little bit different fashion than what you saw Pete Cornish do. I'm going to show a diagram here in case you want to wire it in the way that I did for the cable shootout, what actually ended up being the winning cable of all the cables we tried. Now what I did is I actually wired the shield at both ends and tied that to one of the center conductors. So it still does have high capacitance. However, it does have a true shield from end to end. The shield is connected at the source and it's connected at the load. And as far as being able to remove as much RF from the cable as possible, this is certainly a preferable way to do it instead of floating the shield. There is nobody in the realm of physics in terms of sound or in terms of understanding of balanced versus unbalanced systems that I think would agree that it's going to shield better with a floating shield. It just doesn't work that way in unbalanced systems like we're dealing with guitar. The benefit would be to connect the shield at both ends, so that's why I did it that way, and that's what won the cable shootout. So if you want to do it my way, check out this diagram that I have here and I have linked below so you can wire it exactly the way that I did. I'll also give you the wiring diagrams for how Pete Cornish does it if you want to do it his way. However, I don't see any benefit other than it just having worse RF rejection than the way that I did it. In terms of a sound, I couldn't detect any difference no matter which side you connected the shield on or if you connected it at both sides. So there is some food for thought. I'd say stick with the stuff that we know. The Belden 8412 is right around $1 a foot. If you don't want to make it yourself, I got it listed in Reverb on our store so you can check that out. And I do invite you also to check out our podcast on Spotify, on iTunes, to check out our Patreon page if you want to get some coaching directly one-on-one with me and our technicians. I also highly recommend that you like, you subscribe, and I want you to leave us a comment of what your favorite cable is and whether you believe the directional cable, hocus-pocus, the flat earth enthusiast type equivalent of the cable world, or whether you think that a good old coax is as good as anything else. Tell us in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. See ya.